Welcome. Welcome. I'd like to call the Town Council Budget Public Hearing Meeting of April 7th, 2022 to order, and turn the presentation of the Town Manager's proposed budget for 2022-2023 over to our Town Manager, John Mayer.
I have to thank you, Ed. Well, while we're waiting, I'm Town Manager John Mayer, and this is the Town Council Budget Public Hearing on the Town Manager's proposed budget. This meeting was noticed in the rare reminder on March 31st of 2022. You all set? Okay. Next is an overview of the schedule of items that we're going to cover tonight relating to the budget. And first of all, I'd like to go down memory lane and review some of the past referendums that were approved by the voters of Rocky Hill over the past few years. Okay, thank you. Okay, we can go to the referendum items. As you see, the last 10 years, the voters that have approved over $132 million of referendums, including the renovation of the high school, resizing the fire department's fire trucks, the upgrading the jails for ADA compliance, as well as upgrading the dispatch center, of course, the Mosier School, Community Senior Center. The referendum that passed recently for roads included upgrading parking lots as well. And I think the most popular one by the voters was in favor of Straska Farm. But in order to build and buy, we must borrow. So on the next page, you can see that we did some borrowing over the past few years for the high school, Mosier School, and Straska, et cetera. And so when we were preparing this budget last year at this time, we were projecting out that we would have about $72 million of debt, principal debt owed June 30th of 2022. However, the town was busy in the debt market, and we did issue in the budget year 21-22 about $10.6 million of bonds in July of 21 relating to the acquisition of land acquisition, primarily Backyard Farm, the acquisition of development rights and land, money for roads, and money for the Community Senior Center. Also, the town did a refunding by retiring some bonds that were issued back in 2014. So we had a net reduction in principal of about $11.8 million. And we did a refunding bond for about $10 million that would go for the next 12 years. And finally, we made our last payment of $445,000 in 2020, 21, 22 to pay off a refunding bond that was issued way back in 2010. So at the end of June 2023, we should have $76,270,000 of debt outstanding.
I'm sorry, you're not hearing it. Behind the council.
And I can't see it.
You may just need to be closer to it. I think it's on.
I think it's on, John.
Yeah, it's on, John. It's just have to be closer, I think.
Okay, I'll try moving it over a little bit. And so for this coming budget year, our debt service dropped slightly in principal payments, but increased in interest payments because of the issuance of those bonds in July. Okay, moving over to the revenue side of the budget. As you can see, the proposed budget has $93 million in revenue. As you can see, Rocky Hill relies heavily on its property taxes, which usually makes up, this budget makes up over 86% of it. The second highest one is state grants, and that makes up about 8%. So over the past few years, or number of years, we have been seeing our state grant money go down, thus causing us to use more property tax revenue. This is just a comparison of the adopted budget we're currently in on the revenue side compared to the proposed budget revenues. You can see some of the changes and so on. One of the items that we're not doing this year is using any of the fund balance money for capital improvements, where there's that ordinance that anything that exceeds 6% in fund balance gets transferred into the capital improvement budget in the following budget year. We also used approximately the same amount of ARPA money that we used in last year's budget. Is there a light? Is there a switch? Got it. Okay. Make sure we file that under facilities due tomorrow. Okay. In order to generate the property tax revenue that was stated, we need to go to the grand list. We need a grand list in order to apply a mill rate against. This schedule shows the growth in the grand list over the past 2 years. As you can see, real estate and personal property stayed pretty flat, but our increase is really being driven by motor vehicles. As you can see, we have a substantial increase for motor vehicles that probably reflected the overall 1.83% increase in the grand list. With our grand list increasing by 1.83%, or a little more than $41 million, our proposed mill rate generated enough tax revenues to help us pay for the upcoming budget is 35.6 mills, which is a 1.5 increase over 1.5 mil increase over last year, or a 4.4% increase, and that will generate about $80,625,000 of tax revenue. Applying this increased mill rate to a house valued at $200,000, the tax increase would be about $300 or $25 a month. This schedule is related to our second largest revenue generator, which is state grants. As you can see, we pretty much stayed the same across the board for all our grants except for ECS, in which we saw an increase of over $400,000. That's primarily related to the state trying to get their towns in line on what they're entitled to for ECS grants. And in our case, we were paid less over the years, and there's a catch-up. And slowly, they've been trying to bring it up to the correct amount. So this year, we got an increase of $403,000. This year, in the governor's proposed budget, he has a recommendation to cap property tax rates on motor vehicle cars, on motor vehicles. As you can see, his proposal has it at 29 mils, and then anything that exceeds between 29 mils and the current town tax mill rate would be reimbursed by the state. So in this example, it shows what it would be like if we took the governor's proposal, based it on our current motor vehicle grand list at 29 mils, with the anticipation of getting $1,808,000 reimbursement from the state, which would leave us with $7.4 million in motor vehicle generated revenue. This budget does not reflect the governor's proposal because, as it is, it's a proposal. It's currently in committee, being reviewed and hopefully voted on this week, either today or perhaps tomorrow, if it didn't get voted on today. We followed our same procedure in the past, where we tax it at the same mill rate that real estate and personal property gets taxed at, and it reflects $7.8 million revenues. So depending on what happens, if in this example, if we had to use the governor's proposals based on the information available at the moment, we would be short by about $400,000. Again, if we did use the governor's numbers and we did get reimbursement from the state, that would help reduce the town's mill rate. So there's a lot of moving pieces on this right now, and hopefully once the state adopts their budget and finalizes whether this is going to be in there, something like that, and so on, we can adjust accordingly. And again, the state legislature are in a short session this year, so hopefully they'll have it adopted in early May, their state budget. And again, just a review of the fund balance, use of fund balance, where we're not using anything in fund balance related to the 6% ordinance, but we are using $450,000 for operating expenses, for operating purposes. Okay, let's venture over to the expenditure side, where budget is proposed at $93.3 million. You can see the breakout by town, Board of Ed, the debt, capital improvement, the major components that we usually follow, and the percentage of what that department or line item makes up of the overall budget. So our increase is about 5.3%. Another way of looking at it is by a pie chart that Mona created. So as you can see, there's quite a bit of blue in this, a little bit of gray and so on. That reflects where the money's being, where the money in the budget is going to. And this is another view of it based on the $4.6 million. Where you can see that the Board of Ed's increase is 1.9, town government is 2.6, and the other ones are pretty much flat, and so on. So that what makes up the 1.5 mill rate increase. And again, it's another chart that Mona made up that sort of breaks out the town government expenditures into the two major categories that are driving the expenditure on the town side, which is increased health insurance and pension benefits, as well as union contracts increases. This increase is sort of inflated because it might reflect 2 years of increases because the contracts was settled in the in 21-22 budget year. Just to go over some of the itemize some of the larger increases in the budget on the town side. Let's say we're being driven by union contracts increases, salary increases, et cetera. We are proposing 4 new positions, one for the police department to hire a full-time animal control officer. They're part-time. They had 2 part-time animal control officer and 1 resigned and left. So with the market that it is for employees, proposing going for a full-time animal control officer that would probably be kept busy up at the dog park during this coming summer. Also, human services to help out on the increased amount of work and customers and clientele they are getting due to the mental health issues and COVID and so on. The senior center director is currently the only full-time employee in that department. She needs full-time help there as well as for backup while she's not there. So this position was put in there so that at least she has an additional full-time person in her department. And finally, with the expansion of our footprint in our buildings and so on, facilities is asking for a tradesperson that would help spread out some of the work associated with maintaining the buildings so that it's spread out among 3 as opposed to just 2. And hopefully that would reduce some of the needs to hire outside vendors, contractors to come in and do the work. The other ones are related to some increase in the energy markets and as well as our sanitation budget. Okay, these are a few more. The police department has increased expenses associated with the body cams that they had to buy under that police legislation for the officers as well as for the cars. They recently implemented an app, Atlas One, to help provide notices to the residents on police activities in the town, as well as the equipment in the dispatch center is coming off of warranty, and we needed to get a service contract for that. And one thing we're going to be doing in the assessor's office, instead of doing pictorial flyovers by every other year, we're going to start doing them on a yearly basis. And we need to upgrade some of the modules in our Munis accounting system. The Board of Ed, always a fun area. The superintendent the proposed budget to the Board of Ed of about $50,300,000. The board had their hearings and reduced it down to $1.1 million. The $50 million one, and the $50 million one is in this budget for the Board of Ed, which is an increase of $1.9 million over the prior year, or 3.9%. In this budget, you can see how they are a labor-driven operation, with their salaries making up almost 67% of their budget, and their benefits another 16, so it's approximately 83% of their budget relates to their employee, staff, and so on. Also, they are having expenses rise in property services and tuition for the special ed students increases. Now, looking at the capital improvements budget piece, we have a number of reoccurring items primarily due to leases and funding for our upcoming revaluation by the assessor. So I believe that totals up to well over close to mid-200,000. I could, if I had light, I could see what the number would total up to. So. Some of the new requests this year relate to the fire department's and police department's use of a transmitter, which I believe is 20 years old, on its last legs, analog, and so on. So the proposal is to budget half of the cost in this budget year, and then budget for the second half next budget year, and then plan on implementing it next summer, July or August time period. The high school baseball field gets a lot of use, being one of the major fields in the town, and the Parks Department put in money to do some repair, renovation to that field. The Parks Department just paid off their last payment on their large Toro mower that mows most of the large fields throughout town, and so on. And generally the policy is when that lease runs up, we take out another one, buy a new one, so the one that we just paid off becomes the backup, and we sell the current backup to another town. Parks Department also is asking for a new backhoe that they use for their field upgrades and field work, as well as using it quite a bit for the removal, the installation, and the removal of the docks at the ferry landing. And the last one is our continuing up replacement of the leaf vacuums that are put on the back of the dump trucks every fall for part of our leaf pickup process. And on the Board of Ed side, for capital improvements, the board went out and received bids for upgrading their science labs at Griswold School. This was an initiative on their part in order to bridge the labs from the new ones at the Mosier School and the new ones at the high school, so that the Griswold School would be equivalent. This would be able, they have money in this year's budget in order to fund one lab, and this provides money for next year to renovate a second lab. Also, the board's in need of a roof replacement at Griswold Middle School as well. The projected costs are about $2.6 million. Again, this should qualify to that grant, similar to the grant that the board received when they replaced the roof at Stevens School. So their reimbursement rate dropped from 46 to about 42%. So I think they're projecting their cost to the town is approximately $1.6 million. So to summarize, the town manager's proposed budget is $93,345,829, 5.29% increase. The recommended mill rate is 35.6 mills, an increase of 1.5 over the previous year. I'd like to thank Mona for all her work on the budget this year, putting it together, and all her work to put this presentation together. And the only problem is that she didn't provide me enough light to do this presentation, but we can oversee that one. Also, I want to thank all the department heads for the time and effort they put in their budgets, meeting with them, and putting things together on their needs for the coming year as well as the coming future. As you see, the schedule for the department meetings are on here. Next one will be April 21st at 5:30, and we got a second one on April 28th as well as May 5th. Those that are interested, the Board of Ed will be coming in this year on May 5th to present their budget and so on. And again, the budget needs to be adopted by the third Monday in May, which is May 16th. Is that it? Okay. Oh, now I can see. Okay, and with that, I conclude my presentation, and I can get back with no problems to my chair. Thank you.
So can we ask a question on the presentation or no? That was just fresh in our mind.
No?
Okay, John.
Yep,
Thank you so
yep.
much.
Yeah, now I can see people. No one snuck out on me.
John, do we generally go to public comment at this time? Okay. So is there any, we don't have many folks, so is there anyone here who would like to make public comment? Please come up, state your name and address for the record, please.
Lori won the town quest, is that it?
Yes. Well, I get to look at Chris's face on the monitor while I do this. That's pretty cool. I'm Lori Bosky, 18 Highland Street. I won't take much of your time, and I do thank you in advance for all the time that you will be putting into adopting this budget, and thank all the rest of the people of Rocky Hill who have worked to put this budget together, and John for presenting it to us tonight. Having prepared budgets as an educational administrator for probably 20 years, I do understand what goes into this procedure, and what is before us now is just a step in the process. I know that probably the department heads saw a lot more, and they had to make cuts on their own before the budget came to this place. But the current proposal is still at a 1.5 mil increase, yet the document does state that $1.4 million of the ARP money would be shifted into it. So I would assume at that point that would then reduce the mill rate. I'm assuming that. I'm not sure if that is the case. My concern, though, that using the ARP money is good because it will reduce the amount that the taxpayers will have to burden for next year. But my concern is for the following years for items such as the third police officer that has yet to be filled and other things that will then need to be assumed by our taxpayers. So in essence, I really would encourage you to look at the current budget and reduce as you see fit so that in a couple of years we are not burdened with this huge jump of items that have been currently paid for by the ARP money that suddenly fall back into our pockets. I'm also concerned about the adding 4 new positions in the proposed budget. I guess I understand it that the ACO, the Animal Control Officer, would result in the town having 1.5 ACOs, and if you know me, I am very much all about animals and animal care and animal concerns, but I'm concerned about having 1.5 ACOs. I think if we just added a half, that might make it a little bit more palatable. I don't have any other specific cuts. I've been going through it. I just got the document a day ago, and so there's a lot to look at. But I hope to be able to attend all of your budget workshops to help me further understand the budget process. And again, I do thank you in advance for all the work that you're going to be putting in for the next month and a half. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to be heard? Okay, that concludes public comment. Shall we adjourn, John?
Yes.
Okay.
Motion to adjourn?
Second?
All in